No.
Are you ready now?
There.
Grandma Jellison was my mother's mother, and her father was an electrical engineer. He put in the electric wiring, but he was an alcoholic. And he made excellent money. I'm not so sure for what he was a graduate of MIT, but he had a good background in electrical engineering because he designed and laid out the plans for all of Attleboro, South Attleboro, Norton, Massachusetts, picked out the size wire and directed the whole operation.
For putting electricity in there.
For installation of electricity, right. And everything was fine except that he got good pay and went to the local bar and spent it at the bar room instead of supporting his family. So that placed my grandmother, and I think that there were 11 children altogether in that family. So that placed Grandma in a tough position, and they had to do farming to get enough food to feed the family.
Wow.
They raised their own chickens, and they had quite a little land out in Norton, Massachusetts.
Come sit. Bonnie?
But then Grandma, during the Depression, when she became ill, she had to come and live with us. And one of her sons, my mother's brother Ralph, had to live with us too. My father got jobs for some of the others in the family doing work on the boats. So the Depression was a bad time. And I remember some of the relatives that used to sponge on us when they'd come down from Worcester. And my mother would see them and she'd pull all the shades and wouldn't answer the door. They were just looking for a free meal.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was a very happy family relationship because of the father. And I don't believe any of the children drank as a result of his conduct. Now that one of my mother was, and she used to tell us, if I ever catch you drunk, she says, don't ever come home to this house. She was so bitter against alcohol.
Okay, now Bonnie, we can't have you walking back and forth, okay, in front of the camera while it's going, okay? Why don't you come over here and sit here? I need you to feed it to Daddy. Here, feed it to Daddy. Okay, now stay
What other
here.
stories can you recount to us about Grandma and Grandpa?
Okay, or you stay
Well,
over there. and
During
just
World War
okay.
I,
Go play with your
all
workbench. Go
of
play with
my
your workbench over
mother's
there.
brothers went into service, and 3 of them were wounded. One of them was gassed, Uncle Gene, and he was in and out of hospitals, and he died at a young age, maybe in his early 50s.
You stay over there.
His lungs were never right afterwards. He had
Mustard
breathing
gas
trouble.
or, you know,
Mustard gas, they
Yeah.
call it. Yeah. And the rest of my mother's family, most of them had a rough time because they all went out on their own during the Depression.
How about your father's family?
My father's family, my recollection of my grandfather was from about the age of 6, 5 or 6, and because he died before I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
But we used to go up to Maine. Specifically, they knew their folks were getting old, and so we used to drive 500 miles up to Maine to see the grandfolks. And when we got into Maine, the roads in the spring had ruts in them, and you couldn't even steer your car. All you did was let your wheel go, and it would go right in the ruts. And then when you came to a junction, you had to force the wheel to go into the ruts of the next road that you were going. But Grandpa he was the sea captain, and he was captain on cargo schooners that used to carry granite to Washington, D.C. And then he'd pick up coal to keep the people warm in Maine. He'd stop in Norfolk, and pick up a load of coal, and then bring it back to Maine. So a lot of the big buildings, like the Washington Monument and so forth, that was all built from granite from Maine. And my grandfather brought some of that down there. And he was quite a storyteller. He had a beard. Have you ever seen any pictures of him?
Yeah. Just I picture of him in the launch too.
Yeah. Well, the launch, I can still remember that. I remember going fishing with him. I can remember coming back with codfish, and I can remember how cruel it was to clean the fish. I was impressed with the here he is, the fish is still alive, and he's slicing their guts out, you know.
Yeah.
But then he'd clean them and salt them and lay them out in the sun. And when they dried, they stored them, and that was their winter's food. Salted cod and the vegetables that they had.
They canned the vegetables for the winter?
Yeah, they did canning all their vegetables, so between the fish, the clams.
They salted the clams?
No, the clams they could get right through the winter, on the flats. But he was way up on a hill, about a half a mile from the Penobscot, or the Bagajuice River, which is off the Penobscot River. Very, very pretty spot. And it was facing the east because I remember seeing the sun come up. They kept the house warm with the stove that they cooked with in the kitchen. And they ran the pipe through one wall and had it a long pipe so that it would let heat up to where the bedrooms were. So that the stack was really the heating unit, the stove itself.
Long stack.
Yeah.
27. What about your uncles? Your other uncles? You
That
tell.
was too low.
Now, Uncle George is the one that he got turned down by the Navy because of some heart murmur. He lived to his middle 80s, and he outlived all his brothers. He was the oldest. My father was the youngest brother.
I remember that,
Yeah. So Uncle George was had his captain's license at the age of 21, and he was in command of a largemount, which was in collision off Watch Hill on a cold, wintry night with the temperatures down around 18. And the ship sank off of Watch Hill, and those who survivors ended up in lifeboats, and they came ashore at Block Island.